Hey, Earthlings. Welcome
Hello.
to the Chaos and I'm Right show.
Greetings, everyone.
So we've been doing a sound test for the Christmas show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but we haven't finished it yet. So we're going to have to come back tomorrow and do it. So
I know, it felt like we had loads of time, didn't it? And then suddenly we're like, oh, we're going live in 3 minutes. Oh, okay. And we haven't got Nella. So we're not sure where Nella is either. So, yeah. But we have got Corey, though. Hey, Corey. Good to have you. We've got quite a few people in, actually. Should we do some hellos?
Why not?
So we have got Jeremy, the ape. Hello, ape man. We have got Vegan Review. That's you, isn't it, Doc?
Yes.
Yeah, I always think that's someone else. So we've got the Doc in twice. Deb, hey Deb. We have got Linda. Hello, Linda. Tom's here as well. Tom, thanks for joining us. We have got Keystone Eon. Loving that name. Hey, Keystone. We got Carolyn. Hey, Carolyn. And we have got anyone else want to say hello? Just drop us a little message. Good to see you all. Oh, we've got Dennis just popped in. Good to see everyone.
Just my usual thing about the best interactive chat is on my YouTube channel. So this is going out to 2 Facebook pages and my YouTube channel. It's best if you tune in on the YouTube channel if you want to take part in the chit chat. We will see any comments you make on Facebook, but you won't be able to see anybody's reply to that. And in terms of super chats and all that malarkey, we don't do them. Don't believe in vegans having to pay to have their comments put on the screen. So just comment away, and we shall bung them up on the screen.
We shall. Right. And I've got special powers as well. I can do it as well now, can't I, Doc? For a bit.
Yes. Why do you want to show off and do it? I'll show my hands and you can do things to the screen.
Oh, what shall I do? What shall I do? Oh, I know. I'm going to put Dennis's up. Oh, that was the wrong one. Sorry. but hey, Marv, and hey, Chris, who just said hello, and Financially Frog.
Right.
Why do vegans defend others' choices to abuse? Oh, we're getting serious already with that one. Greetings to you, all you fab vegans from Galway Island, the home of humanity. Trigger Martin. I keep putting that one up. I need practice at this, Doc.
Is that a troll thing or what? The Financially Frog thing?
I don't know. No, I don't know. Is it?
Well,
Financially Frog, are you trolling us?
Well, why do vegans defend
others' choice to
use fellow animals?
Is that when vegans get called apologists, perhaps? Is that what they're referring to?
No, you have to clarify the question. That's not very clear. So, have we actually announced the fact that we've got Dr. Corey Wrenn?
Dr. Corey Wrenn.
Yeah.
Do you like being called doctor, or do you not like it?
Nobody calls me doctor.
Because I was
but I don't think so much in the UK.
Yeah.
I was called the doc. So now I've got 2 docs because I'm going to have to say which doc I'm talking to now, and I'm going to have to go and get myself a little doctorate so I can be doc as well. You can all be the doc gang.
I'll add you to the document.
Yeah, we've got a very interesting topic to talk to Corey about. The whole Interrogating Capitalism. Are we going with that article? We never decided because we had 3 minutes left. If we're going with that reindeer article to begin with.
Yeah, but what it was that this took out. This was about 4 weeks ago when we noticed this, wasn't it? And we thought, that's going to be an interesting one for around, this time of year and everything. But then we realized it's 10 years old anyway. So. So it's 2014, And then you've got a link to the original. I can press that and it'll come on. Yeah, and that, again, that's 2014, obviously. So, and also, this individual seems captive. So, very less obvious what's kind of going on.
I mean, the reason they were saying that they were painting these reindeer's antlers in this kind of obviously in this special paint in order to stop them being hit by cars, because so many of them are being hit, killed, and injured every year. But then there was this whole fact check thing from Reuters, wasn't there, Doc, where they were saying actually some of the pictures that are going around are not even real. So I'm not sure if I'm guessing this picture was real, but there were a few pictures that weren't actually real that were being sent around as well in the media, weren't there? That weren't actually they'd been faked.
Yeah, well, I guess it would only make sense for us to talk about it if it's been a year-on-year thing. If it was just a one-off 10 years ago, it's we're kind of too late, aren't we? So
yeah, we're a bit like it's 10 years old. I don't know if they're still doing this.
So, but what we were thinking of is the fact that it's obviously an imposition on the individual, but it's one of those be cruel to be kind type situations or something like that. Is that what we had in mind? The fact that you're obviously doing something which the individual might not like, but for their benefit.
Because also it can make them more vulnerable, can't it, to predators or to people hunting them, especially the human predator, I imagine.
My guess here is because this is probably in Lapland, where reindeer are considered livestock by the Sami people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this might be also complicated as it's an indigenous issue. I'm not sure if people are aware, like with reindeer in the Lapland region, the Sami folks are indigenous to that region, but one of the ways, it's just sociologically interesting how you define ethnicities and race and all that sort of thing. But one of the reasons, or one of the characteristics that defines Sami as indigenous, is that they have to have this link to reindeers and work with reindeer. And so this is creating a bit of tension because a lot of Sami people are actually getting urbanized and have no interest whatsoever in exploiting reindeer. But then they are excluded from their protections in that region as an indigenous person, part of an indigenous community. So I'm wondering if this is kind of linked to the Sami folks in some way, because reindeer is such a big part of the culture.
Yeah, some kind of cultural lag type situation.
Is my mic okay this time, by the way?
Yeah, loud and clear. Great.
Oh, yes. Well,
I hope you don't mind. I'm celebrating that fish marking papers and
I've got some water. So
cheers, Corey. Yeah, I've got. Who knows what's in this bottle? You never know. No, it is actually water. It is. But yeah, no. Cheers to you, Corey, and well done for getting through the term.
Yeah, we come to a team agreement, Corey, not to mention the mic situation. That's not even true. Anyway,
no.
Should I drop this out then, because we can't really speak about it that much in the sense.
Yeah,
it's so old, isn't it? Yeah. So, but it is an interesting thing. But as you say, they might actually make the individual more vulnerable to predators and certainly hunters. And all hunters have got to do is, bit like lamping, just turn a light on and, suddenly, someone who was camouflaged is no longer camouflaged. So, Right, before we get on to our business then, do we want to address this question? It was the thing about apologists.
Oh, okay.
Do we want to do that, or should we get on with it and come back to that, or how do you want to work it?
We could maybe come back to it. I think maybe get. I'm sure Corey's got a lot to share with us. Don't want to miss out on anything like that. But no, it is an interesting. Whatever Financially Frog is talking about, might be interesting to come back to. Definitely.
Yes. Okay, so was it your idea to interrogate capitalism, Corey?
I think this is Wendy's idea.
Oh no, the original idea was definitely Corey's. So Corey, you did the conference though, didn't you? The vegan sociology conference called Interrogating Capitalism. What made you choose that theme? Did you choose it, or was it like a sort of a team decision? How did that come about?
Well, by the way, if anyone is interested, so this is referring to the International Association for Vegan Sociologists that I started up with Zoe Sutton, who runs the animal section of the Australasian animal section. And basically, at the end of every conference, we have a business meeting and everyone's welcome to attend. And we say, all right, what do we want to do next year? And usually what happens is there'll be one person who has a good idea and the rest of us kind of like wait for that. And then we go with it. So that's pretty much it. I think because we're still in early days with this organization, that was our fifth conference, that we're kind of honing in on some of the aspects of what makes vegan sociology sociological. And so one of the main distinctions we have as a discipline is our critique of capitalism. And Wendy, when we met, I don't know if we talked about this, but when we met in person, we were at a vegan psychology conference at my university. And bless them, I love them. Like I get on with them, and it's been a really productive sort of collaboration when I've been working with the vegan psychologists. But one of the things that we would butt heads about is this lack of a structural sort of awareness to what frames people's relationships with other animals. They like to focus quite a lot more on personality differences and motivational things, which of course motivation and things like that matters to sociologists. But what they would miss is, well, how does capitalism shape this? How does capitalism shape our organizational structures? How does capitalism shape this focus on individualism, which psychology loves to do? And so that's one of the main distinctions I think that vegan sociology brings to the table that we don't really have a lot of in critical animal studies. Critical animal studies itself, like historically, has been quite anti-capitalist and very critical of that. But now, since then, it's kind of broadened out. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my interpretation of the field now. It's much more into the humanities and film reviews, and now psychology is really popular. And I feel like we've sort of lost track of or lost sight of that core anti-capitalist kind of critique or essence that was foundational to the rise of critical animal studies 10, 15, even 20 years ago. So that's really what we aim to do. And so vegan sociology is bring that back. And by the way, for people who don't know, critical animal studies was primarily founded by sociologists. And that, unfortunately, is kind of critical animal studies is intentionally interdisciplinary and has taken off, which is wonderful. But the sociology has gotten quite lost along the way. And so we really wanted to spotlight what makes us distinct. And of course, you guys both are fully aware, capitalism is absolutely at the fundamental core of what happens to non-human animals. That's where it came from. Yeah, it's about kind of delineating our field and highlighting what sociology does best as far as critiquing speciesism.
Is the latest conference online now, Corey?
It is, yes. Oh gosh. Yeah, this is going to be the last time we record because it's down to volunteers to edit all those YouTube videos, and a lot of that ends up being me, and I just don't have time to do it anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, the talks are all up on YouTube on our channel, Vegan Sociology.
Right, very good. Yeah, actually, though, what you've just said about psychology and sociology has been a bugbear of mine in the sense that I've always tried to get people in the movement to understand the structural side of things. And there's so much focus on the individual. And of course, Niebuhr comments on that in his first book, doesn't he? Where he's saying that, the concept of speciesism was seen as an individual thing by Ryder, and then that was popularized by Singer, the same. And then he even mentions Kim Stallwood, and there was a thing there where it's almost like you've got particular species as individuals, and I think that's what informs the language of animal abuser and that kind of stuff, right? Whereas if we see it as more structural, I think the objection to the structural thing, and it's always been the case, whether you're talking about criminology or anything, it seemed to let the individual off the moral hook. Do you think that's why it gets pushed back?
Well, wait, sorry, what gets pushed back? The structure?
Well, a structural analysis, because I think the movement likes to, you're a carnist. You like to point fingers at individuals and call them names, right?
Yeah, and I think my interpretation of why the structural bit gets pushed back quite a bit is because it's a lot harder. Okay, well, let's just stop capitalism. Let's find a replacement. Like, okay, what? Like, and I always feel that when I'm teaching my students, because especially I teach environmental politics and an animal class, and it's a very interdisciplinary class, and students coming from all over the university, and they are coming at it with this they maybe never been challenged on an individualistic sort of influence over their thinking and their morality and ethics and analysis. And I feel like I'm always I always have to kind of prove the relevance of this or prove why it's important, even if it's not so easy, because I feel like, all right, well, we have to have the structural analysis. Let's just undermine patriarchy, undermine capitalism, undermine white supremacy, no big deal. And it's difficult. Whereas with psychology, it's more a matter of, okay, well, how can we zoom right into this? And if we tweak that, then people will choose this over that. And it seems much more controllable, and you can get some so-called results from that. Whereas sociology is much more broad, long-term sort of thinking. And that does not bode well, I think, for people who are frustrated with the slowness of social change. And then obviously for nonprofits and charities who have to demonstrate quick victories in order to substantiate their grant applications and justify getting more money in. So that also makes it difficult, these sociological approaches. And but that's interesting about maybe deflecting blame in some way, and that gets back to the financial frog bit there.
I mean, I've always thought that people in the movement have a reluctance to take that kind of, oh, you're letting them off the hook. If you're actually blaming their socialization or the cultural aspects that they're born into and kind of generationally transmitted and all that kind of stuff, it lets the individual off, doesn't it? Or at least it can be seen that way. I mean, I don't think it does really, because obviously you've got the link between the macro and the micro. And the great thing about it is if you've got a structural analysis, you can then slide between the two, which has always been the strength of it. But I do notice, going back to what you just said, is that a lot of modern day activists have said that they don't think that patriarchy is real and that there's nothing wrong with capitalism.
Wait, who said that?
Oh, just activists. People? Yeah.
People.
They?
Yeah, them over there. Yeah. them lot. I mean, these tend to be the reducitarian animals only type faction in the movement, because they're very, very focused, on the on the one kind of way of looking at things. So any diversion from that seems to be, from their point of view, some kind of threat.
Just a question here, actually. Just, I mean, I don't claim to be any expert on any of this, especially in present company. But are there certain elements of capitalism that we should maybe pull out as to say, well, these are the elements of capitalism that actually we are that are mainly problematic? Are there elements of capitalism that could work if they were, if we had a different model, or if we had a different societies living differently, maybe with more of a vegan mindset? Are there strands of capitalism that could work? Because it seems like whatever mode, I mean, people always come back with that argument of well, what about communism? There's still mass exploitation, use of fellow animals, oppression under other systems, although there is the argument that communism isn't as it's meant to be. Yes, sorry.
Francione makes that argument, that one.
Yeah. So that's my point, is if there might be problems under whichever system because of the way we structure our societies, are there strands that could work, and are there specific strands we should be picking out and saying, okay, these are specific elements that we're going to be against, as opposed to capitalism generally? Does that make sense?
The only positive thing it's really difficult for me to admit anything positive in capitalism. And I do understand the background to that argument that Gary Francione makes, and we could discuss that if you want, because I think it's a very superficial sort of approach. But anyway, the only thing I can really think of positive from capitalism is through competition is that sometimes you get really cool product development and technology development out of that. But again, Karl Marx would argue that through capitalism, our creativity has been absolutely stifled. And imagine what we as a species could achieve if we had our basic needs met, if we didn't have to worry about going to work all these hours every day just to sustain ourselves, that we have enough healthcare, that we have enough food, we have shelter, warmth, and all that sort of thing. If we as a society could organize that in such a way as that your basic needs are met, what could we achieve? And so actually capitalism stifles creativity in a lot of ways. So sorry, I just backtracked. I don't know what's positive about capitalism. Sorry. Roger?
Yeah, well, I mean, on that point, Marx has got a famous quote, hasn't he, where he's talking about thinking about the future where, you would, because it's very speciesist, he said, you could go fishing in the morning and then you be a poet, and that quote. And but it's kind of like what you were just saying, Corey, that the idea artistically, you would be let off the leash because you're not just trying to meet your rent, or you're not trying to meet, as you said, the basic needs, because capitalism makes a market out of people's basic needs, and you've got to struggle to meet them. And so in terms of a flourishing society, if you could think of a way of not doing that, then it seems automatically to be superior.
So now in late stage capitalism, one of the characteristics we see is, as Roger mentioned, increasingly things you need just to survive are being monetized. So increasingly water is no longer free. It's not considered a human right that you should have access to that without charge. Pornography has profitized people's intersex lives and all this sort of thing. So everywhere you look, things that used to be just considered part of everyone's right as a human being is now being commodified and sold back to us. So just thinking about like one of the reasons, by the way, that we see nation states so very much so involved in pushing population, like in Russia and Japan, they're really going hard right now to encourage women to have more babies. Well, why is that? It's because you need more people to be cheap labor, to produce things, to consume things, right? And so imagine if we freed all these people from just sustaining the capitalist system in that way, and we focus instead on focusing on the population's ability to create and to innovate and to cooperate. So capitalism, unfortunately, does stifle quite a lot there. And again, in this conversation, we're not even talking about what could be possible if we recognize like solidarity with other animals. What could we achieve as a species if we acknowledge other animals as persons, as comrades, as friends, as neighbors?
Another question. So do you think we can put the genie back in the bottle, right? I guess my point being there is, I suppose that in today's cultures, because we have this capitalist kind of model, and I think humans are generally quite addicted to consumption. And I think obviously that's encouraged, isn't it? And also I think people do feel entitled to consume. It's almost like it's their right to actually consume and to keep consuming. But yet liberation, as we're looking at it here in this structural entanglement, requires degrowth, less consumption. Is it a bit of a utopian dream? I guess is my question as well. Like, can we expect people to give up their privilege? And I think maybe even a part of biologically and socially driven addiction. We're kind of taught to have more, bigger, better. We're kind of driven like that, I think. And we're probably taught to be driven like that. That's not to say we naturally are, but I think culturally we are. And I just wonder, especially looking at the theory versus the practical, how do you think, and Corey, especially, I'm asking for your guidance on this as well. What guidance have you got to advocates for fellow animals of how to maybe have conversations with people about this kind of thing, if we are to try and encourage people? Because one thing I'm thinking about is when you have street outreach conversations, a go-to thing for activists, advocates, is to say, you know, actually living vegan isn't difficult, and actually all you have to do is substitute that product for a vegan friendly product, and then it's all fine. You know, you're addicted to your cheese, that's fine, we have vegan cheeses. And so it's like switching out products and still encouraging consumerism. So I just wonder how, if you've had any thoughts, if you think about that kind of thing, like how do we practically start to advocate against capitalism, against consumerism and all of that kind of thing within our own vegan movement?
Well, the vegan movement has very much so been entangled with the environmental movement, I would say. And like, I know for me as a sociologist, the Animals and Society section of the American Sociological Association, almost every single one of us was also in the environmental group. So I do know there's quite a lot of overlap there. And I think there's lessons to glean from that. I think that a lot of these products, they really aren't marketed towards, and I know Roger's talked about this as well, I don't think that they're really marketed towards vegans. They're really marketed towards people who are trying to reduce, or even people who are trying to transition. And, you know, I see them as sort of like once in a while specialty things because they're expensive. And I know they're not good for me. This is shame on me. We ordered Papa John's pizza the other night as a sort of end of year treat. So greasy. It was like so greasy. So it doesn't matter that this is vegan. It's still like supporting this big awful chain, and it's unhealthy and all that sort of thing. But again, I think a lot of this is not about me as a 20 plus year vegan. This is about people who are trying to break free from a society that has normalized this type of consumption. And it's a sort of transitionary tool. What do you think, Roger?
Well, I just wanted to say I love Wendy's 11-part questions.
I know, I'm really good at 11-part questions.
If I can remember any of the strands whatsoever. I mean, I think I would, as you were going through the question, what Deb has said came to my mind in the sense that you were saying, is it utopian? I mean, the environment might force it, whether it's a utopian idea that we're having difficulty transmitting over to people who, for selfish reasons or whatever, was behind the question, was resistant. It could be that, we've got to reduce consumption because, the actual earth is going to force it on us. And so then it's a question of how to manage that. And another point about the vegan products, I think, and Corey, you're right. I think it was the Impossible Burger people who said, we don't care what vegans think, right? Because there was all that stink about them doing vivisection on rats, right? And so they said, we don't care about what vegans think because that's not our market, And I think a lot of the plant-based products think that about vegans. I mean, I think vegans, ironically, for the plant-based market, I think vegans are a pain in the arse because our standards are a bit too high, perhaps, that kind of thing. So, where was I going with that? I can't remember now. Help.
We've got an 11-part answer to my 11-part question.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm only into 1.5 parts of your 11-part question.
We can talk about voting with the dollar. That's a big debate that I see popping up. Well, to vote with your dollar, buy this and don't buy that. And I think, I don't know, I think you guys are a little bit more in tune with the activist community than I am. I think I've not really been hearing what the average activist is up to these days, but voting with your dollar, I feel like increasingly we're starting to question whether or not that's an effective tool. And you mentioned also earlier about the role of this sort of, can we link non-consumerism or less consumerism with these social movements? And one of the things we see time and time again is with social movements based on inequalities, injustices based on identities, is that by earning rights, what that translates into often is rights to the marketplace, right to consume. Because the human rights project has been entangled very much so with the rise of capitalism. So what happens, for instance, with the feminist movement when it's not about consuming, it's about basic rights like I want to live, I want to have bodily integrity, autonomy, access to food and shelter, things that just women historically had not had access to, or freedom from sexual harassment and rape. But then by the 1970s and 80s, it sort of gets co-opted by capitalism, where now it's about like these advertisements like L'Oreal, you're worth it. You're worth it. So buy these things, or you've come a long way, baby. And it's like cigarette ads or whatever. The gay rights movement, very famously as well, was co-opted very early on by alcohol and car companies that jumped on that and said, if you want to be seen as an individual with rights in this world, it's that right to consume. And that absolutely has happened with the vegan movement as well. In fact, even worse so, because non-human animals are absolutely and completely erased from the dialogue. And I mean, absolutely. So I recently finished a chapter on veganism in British media. And I did a year, I think it was 2020, it was kind of, or 21, when COVID happened. And I was really looking to see like if COVID impacted how people talked about veganism. And it wasn't actually turned out not to be a major part of the conversation. Because what was interesting, it was a replication study of Matthew Cole's vegophobia article from, it was about over 10 years ago. And when he first did that study, he and I think it was Karen Morgan was his co-author, they looked at over a year in British media how many times veganism was mentioned and how it was mentioned, what was the context. And it was something like 400 or so articles. And they looked at every single article and coded each and every article. And so 10 plus years, it was probably near 15 years of a difference when they collected their data and when I collected my data. It was over 40,000 mentions of veganism. So there's no way that I could read every single article and code it. I had to do a sample. So wow, as soon as I did that first initial step of my study, I was like, good grief, that's a massive increase from 400 to 40,000. Like, whoa. So then I did my sample and I start coding and I found out actually this is all about selling shit. This is about selling stuff, buying stuff, new vegan products, new vegan subscription service, new vegan restaurant, new vegan this, new vegan that. And it had nothing to do with animals. And in fact, out of the 420 articles that I sampled, only one mentioned animal, or not mentioned, but featured made central animal rights. And so what had happened was that, yes, veganism had seriously exploded in the past 15 years. And a lot of that was positive representation. But that positive representation was almost all about selling stuff. And the animal had been completely, it's really an absent referent. It's completely erased from the dialogue. So that is really the consequence of this focus on vegan food and stuff and consumerism, is that animals are getting lost because they're not a part of this marketplace except for things to be bought and sold, or in the case of veganism, analogs to be bought and sold. So what does this mean for a movement?
Yeah, it almost seems like veganism has grown because of vegan capitalism in a way, and it's sad to say that, but I think it has, and it just seems to have completely changed to when I became vegan, and no doubt from when Roger became vegan even further back. It's just because there weren't all those products before. You were vegan and you went out. If you went out to eat and there wasn't anything to eat, you just didn't eat. I've been so many places where I've just like skipped. And I'm not saying this is like how we have to go or anything, but I've skipped lunch, or I've like literally had a packet of crisps and nuts for lunch. Or it's not like, oh well, I'm not going to go vegan because if I go out and there's nothing for me to eat, I'm just going to do that. I think is a different mindset now, to convincing people to go vegan because you can replace all of your stuff. And it does make it easier, I think, as an advocate, to have something like that to offer to draw people in and things like that. But it does seem like a lot of veganism isn't actually veganism at all anymore. It is just plant-based eating and products.
Is this progress? Do we see this as, I'm not going to lie. with all the erasure of animals, it still makes me kind of happy to see that much representation of veganism that's not completely negative.
Yeah.
But is it progress? That's the different question.
Actually, I've got a question for you, Corey, about that, but I want to kind of just suspend it for a little while.
I just need to put this up for just a moment. Thanks.
Yeah,
just wanted to see those words in right. Thanks so much, Tom.
I always knew there was a reason why you didn't have control of the.
Oh, don't take the power away from me, don't, please.
So going back to Corey, you were talking about almost like feminism was kind of not bought off, but certainly kind of there's almost suddenly a market because of that. And presumably you're aware of the Edward Bernays issue of the torch of freedom, right?
What is that now?
Oh, this is quite a while ago, but Bernays was one of these people, and the Frankfurt School and critical theory talk about this, where there was a change when people started to consume differently because they're persuaded that they could buy things that they wanted rather than buy things that they needed. Usually what happened was everybody bought what they needed, and you mended it and you wore it out and this kind of stuff. And then they came up with this idea, which, I mean, ultimately based on kind of Nazi propaganda and stuff, but on this idea that you could sell people what they want. And that means that, that opens up all kinds of markets. And what Bernays was hired to do, because he was public relations, he invented public relations, right? And he got that from the Nazis' propaganda, but he said, well, we can't use that word because of that association. We'll call it something else, public relations. He was hired to make cigarettes socially acceptable for women to smoke, and in particular in public, because there was a social taboo about that, right? So he goes through all that, and the story of all that is in this brilliant series called Century of the Self, and it's a 4-part. It's 4 hours, 4 one-hour shows, and it's so vegan relevant you wouldn't believe it. There's so much in there that is relevant to veganism. And so he did this thing where he hired some debutantes to hide cigarettes on their person and stuff. And he got the press, and a given signal, he kind of, they all got their cigarettes out and lit them up, right? And this was in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty. And so he called it the torches of freedom. And so he associated cigarette smoking with the Statue of Liberty, and the torch. So it's a fascinating story, but it goes to show how this kind of capitalism can create markets where there wasn't one.
Yeah.
And that then impacts on everything we've talked about, particularly the fact that you then get instrumental reason, where people in capitalism, but also our fellow animals and also the natural world, resources, are just seen as things to use. And that's the danger of capitalism. And so the vegan ethos should be opposed to it on the grounds that the first question a vegan should ask is this just, and not, is this profitable?
Right.
And that's like an anti-capitalist question.
I had not heard of that. I took some notes there so I can follow up on this. But one of the other things that we see with like modern consumption is this focus on, because you said there was a shift from need to want, and now it's about not just want, but treat yourself, like Parks and Rec, treat yourself. So this indulgence, a sense of indulgence. And that's one of the reasons that fast food like proliferates, is because we know it's naughty, we know it's not good for us, but treat yourself. So it's sort of a hyper want situation, isn't it? Like, you deserve this.
I mean,
sorry, I was going to say there's a nationalistic element as well. When you said the Statue of Liberty, I'm really excited. I'm going to check this out, and I'm sure I can apply this to a lot of stuff I'm working on. But I was thinking about was it Laura Wright's work on the vegan project? It's about 10 years old now, that book.
Yeah.
And she was writing about how after 9/11, what did George Bush say? Was go out and consume, go consume, go consume. This is how you express your loyalty to the country. And of course, now we know with Donald Trump back in the office and soon to be, unfortunately, that meat politics is very much so part of that. And one element of the campaign, the Trump campaign, was they're going to take your hamburgers away. And, this is part of being an American, is consuming this kind of stuff. So it's a political act as well. So that's actually, we haven't talked about that, but I think that's something we want to make very clear. With capitalism, it's not just consuming for the sake of consuming, because the state, and Karl Marx identified this, the state exists, the nation state exists to support capitalist economy. And that's why, like, in certain cases we see where, like, corporations themselves are protected legal persons. So it's not that the state is supposed to rein in capitalist industry. We see actually it's the opposite, that the state sort of exists in order to facilitate these industries. And gosh, look at Elon Musk as a wonderful example of that. Basically bought his way into the White House.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, he's just going to open the floodgates, really. Another example of what you said was, I think it was Sunak with, what is it, Eat Out to Help Out. So it was, so it was, again, kind of get out there and consume, post-COVID.
Yeah.
Kickstart the economy again and all the rest of it. So, rather than think critically about it, and also kind of, well, what we've got now, we're consuming less. Isn't that a good thing? Or let's just analyze it anyway. It's no, let's get back. They want to get the treadmill going. And in the meantime, of course, they then use the pandemic, for example, as another means of capitalist production with all the PPP stuff. So it's almost like they can't lose, really, in the way it's set up, because anything that arises creates a market.
Yeah, it's like most people have actually got jobs that are actually pointless, aren't they? But they all keep everything ticking over as well. But like, so many people are in jobs that are just absolutely pointless jobs. Like, they're almost just unnecessary. But everyone kind of needs that. And it seems like with all this stuff you're talking about, with this structural, the way things are in society, in this structural way, it's like we're stuck into these systems. And I just wonder, because they're so powerful and they do keep, like, the machine keeps ticking along and the cogs are all oiled and they're all kind of running as they're meant to, and they're kept running that way by the governments and nations and whatever. Like, how do we as individuals do anything about this? Can we? Do we? What should we do? And when we're stuck in these systems, because most of us have to go out to work to pay our bills, to pay our rent, to pay our mortgage, to whatever, and some of us work in these industries that rely, that are part of this kind of, capitalist consumerism. We might work in a place where it's a goods driven market, but that pays our wages in order to pay our bills. Do you know what I mean? We're all trapped in these systems. What can we do, or how do we kind of fight this, right? Other than maybe just trying to consume less? How do we break free of this? Let's go set up a commune and grow our own vegetables. I mean, that seems to be a good. Actually, Corey, you are someone who is doing something like that in Kent, don't you? They have, like, they've got land and they're doing like a community growing project, vegan. Is it vegan land? No, it's not vegan land, but it's vegan.
So she does organic farming. Yeah, her name's
farming. Yeah,
just a powerhouse of a human who's doing lots of that kind of stuff. A lot of it is community building as well, not just, because I think that's important, is one of the things capitalism does, alienates us from one another. That alienation makes us controllable because we don't recognize our shared oppression, and it also limits our capacity for solidarity with one another.
Yeah.
Communes, I mean, they've got their merits, and that, like, the feminist movement was very much so part of that as well, kind of retreating from a patriarchal society that they just didn't want to negotiate with anymore. Even, by the way, the vegan feminists also were very much so interested in that. Feminists for Animal Rights, which is an organization now defunct, but was co-founded by Marty Keel. they very much, they were, we could talk about gender politics and like who counts as a woman, but this is in the 80s and the 90s. And they said, well, we're women only because we're tired of wasting energy on this patriarchal machine. We can actually be more effective if we just split off. So even the feminists were thinking about sort of retreating in that way. I don't know if retreating is accessible to everyone or a long-term solution, because it really is, if you have the privilege to escape, you escape. And then it's kind of how I feel when I took the job here in the UK when Donald Trump became president. I was like, not everybody had that luxury to do that. But I can offer some
we doing that, or are you doing that?
I can offer some feedback from a book I just read, highly recommended, called Animals and Capital by Dinesh Waddiwell. Just came out last year. And he's one of my favorite sort of Marxist anti-speciesist writers. He really, really dives into Marx. Bless him, because it's not easy to do. If anyone here has tried to read Marx, it's a slog. I mean, it just is. It's the way he wrote, and it was in the 1840s, 50s, 60s. But Dinesh goes into Marx and sort of salvages, because Marx wasn't really thinking about other animals. But we recognize that there's a lot of similarities in the way that human workers have been exploited and non-human animals. And so he goes into that. Dinesh is actually quite critical, and Dinesh is a person of color, by the way. Dinesh is actually quite critical of the capacity of intersectionality, and thinks that actually intersectionality does not work so well when it comes to non-human animals in a capitalist system, because their status in the capitalist system is so unique in that they are commodities, but also workers. And whereas the idea with workers is to kind of keep them alive so you can continue producing, with non-human animals, of course, there's an end point, and their value really is materialized on the point of death. So it's not as easy, he says, to sort of bring in an intersectional approach. So two of the things he advises at the end of that book, spoiler, one of them is looking at trade unions and offering solidarity to trade union workers. And I don't know that we see quite a lot of that in the animal rights movement, but his argument was that these are the people who are literally pushing back on capitalism's extremes and advocating for some humanity in that system. And he says, although that humanity is very much so anthropocentric, by focusing on their rights and slowing down the machine and saying, you can't just have full reign over, sorry, another species' term, full control over this group of people, that actually will have positive ramifications for non-human animals as well. So offering some solidarity to trade union workers. And the other solution or suggestion he offers is solidarity with indigenous communities, indigenous groups, because indigenous peoples pre-contact with settler colonialism had a whole different way of making life work without capitalism. And although that he does recognize that brings in some conflicts of interest, because we also know part of indigenous rights movements are about extending the right to hurt other animals, like bringing back whaling and things like that. He says, so that will be certainly conflicting. But overall, he says it's very important, because this is a group of people who have been existing outside of the capitalist system and offer a very important point of resistance to the normalcy and the taken for grantedness of capitalism, which, by the way, let's not forget, has not been around that long in human history. And given the reality of environmental limitations, it probably won't be around that much longer either, maybe a few hundred years. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the future of capitalism, but the limits of the environment, the world's limits, I say, we need to be having an imagination for an alternative future, because it's going to be pushed on us very soon. What do you think, Roger?
Well, again, I think the environment might have a say in that. This is an interesting point. We can start by not electing fascists. And so, I mean, we're talking about capitalism, but I think that one of the kind of current contemporary dangers has got to be oligarchy, right? Which is what seems to be being set up in the States. And it's as though, well, I wouldn't say that society is sleepwalking into it. It's almost like things have got to such an extent that we can't know who can stop it.
Yeah. I want to bring attention here to two other Marxists, because when we talk about capitalism and in the animal rights movement. I think it's a hyper focus on Karl Marx, but there's a whole litany of other more recent Marxists who are really born of the World War II era. So we have, or I think in Gramsci's case, maybe even earlier, I'm getting my dates mixed up, but Antonio Gramsci was in prison, in jail, in an Italian jail for his Marxist socialist beliefs, and wrote letters from jail about the issues with fascism and how he was in hegemony, and how the most frightening thing about hegemony is the popular support of the people, which is what we're seeing right now with Donald Trump. That's what makes it frightening. It's not just people from above clamping down and forcing us and telling us what to do. It's when they indoctrinate us, socialize us. A lot of that is through capitalist manipulation and the fetishization of consumerism. That is a real and lasting control. And so when we see Donald Trump take the popular election, the popular vote, that really is cause for concern. Theodore Adorno also was very much so coming out of the post-World War II era, fleeing Germany, and was even paying attention to the most, not trivial is not the word for it, but the most basic everyday sort of aspects of culture. He comes to the United States and he sees a lot of similarities, very prophetic, isn't it? A lot of similarities with Nazi Germany. And actually, scholars of fascism say that many nation states are really one foot in the door when it comes to fascism because of the sort of indoctrination of the people, even like through music. So Adorno wrote quite a bit about music, popular music, standard music. And I teach this to my students and say, why the heck do you think we're even learning about music? What does that have to do with fascism? And we have to sit back and like actually unpack it. Like a lot of this is pre-digested. It discourages critical thinking. It encourages you to step in line and follow orders, not think too critically. And even in your off work time, your leisure time, you're being indoctrinated through the things that you consume. So perhaps that's a take-home lesson for vegans, is not just thinking about how the capitalist machine like harms animals in the production and all that sort of thing, but how we as individuals living in a capitalist society are alienated from one another. We are focused on ourselves. It's very individualistic. We think that consuming is a human right and consuming is living the good life, right? And we're also just things that we don't think we're consuming, like our leisure time and the way things we do in our free time, is that sort of reinforcing this lack of critical thinking and this sort of, and this culture, if you will, of obedience to an unequal society, to hegemony.
Mm. Yeah, Adorno wrote a lot about music, as you say, and I think he saw jazz as being critical of, like not following the rules, right? And so he thought it was a bit revolutionary, didn't he? So that was an interesting thing. Right. Yeah, the question that I wanted to ask you before we run out of time is: there's a lot of talk in the movement now, and this is to do with sales. So it's an ironical question. It's the fact that there's these forces in the movement that for many years have been trying to convince people that veganism is a scare word. And, we had to have a long fight, with the likes of, the Melanie Joy cartel over that kind of stuff.
Sorry. Go on.
Cartel.
Oh, you like that, Lydia? But now the what they're trying to kind of focus on now is the idea that vegan labeling of products is a very kind of bad thing, and there's been some kind of research on that, and that plant-based would be much more conducive for sales. And I just wondered whether you'd seen any recent stuff on this, Corey, because I just see, I'm in Ireland, I just see vegan labels everywhere. It doesn't seem to be that everybody's kind of going, no, we've got to take the labels off. I don't see it, but that's the suggestion.
I have a lot of things to say about that. We'll try to squeeze it in before we have to leave. I haven't seen any recent research on this, but I do remember seeing a study come out a few years ago that they actually, it's a psychology study. So, yeah, and psychology is good for these types of things, I think, but found that actually people were not turned off by the word vegan. But with plant-based, it's like, well, what actually does that mean, right? And then that's the whole point with the reducitarian cartel, whatever. because that's the element, right? It's not about, it has nothing to do with vegan politics. We can put plant-based on it. It's wishy-washy. We're not going to alienate anybody who's going to be potentially sending us grant money to support our charity. That's what that's all about. There's a lot of this there's a lot of hype about, well, we don't want to alienate people with veganism. It's like, that's not the people. It's the people who are sending you grant. And again, this is capitalism as well. We need to think about also, before we leave, with the influence of capitalism on the charity structure, and how it's not about effectiveness. It's not about like what alienates people or not alienates people. It's actually about, this is watered down language that will not offend the bodies, the funding bodies that sustain our organization. And it has nothing to do with the average person on the street, and whether, because the average person on the street knows what vegan is. We know what that is. It's just kind of like the language wars that are happening now over Oatly and other analogs, where the companies are saying, you can't call it oat milk because people think it's going to be cow's milk. And it's like, actually, we don't have research to support that that's true. People aren't that ignorant. They know that it's oat milk, not cow milk. But again, it's about protecting space and capitalism and like your capitalist competition. It's not really about people's ignorance or not. I don't buy it. I think the average person knows what vegan is now, and the plant-based thing is frankly just wishy-washy and causes me a lot of annoyance when I go out to eat and it says plant-based and I have to figure out what does that actually mean, because it doesn't always mean vegan.
Yeah, I tend to think the distinction between plant-based and vegan is very useful within the movement. For example, the obvious example would be, it'd be nice for the plant-based celebrities not to call themselves vegan, but quite often the plant-based celebrities don't. It's we impose that on them. I think we did that with people like Schwarzenegger and this kind of stuff, right? Because, I mean, obviously we're in a social movement. We want the social movement to be as large as possible. So we like to co-opt as many people as we can, even if they're not quite vegan. And so we kind of like make these compromises on all this kind of stuff. Whereas it then pushes journalists to think of veganism as a diet, you know, the thing that you mentioned before, which is obviously a problem from the vegan philosophy point of view. And it would really help the movement, I think, if we're a bit sharper on that distinction. And I know a lot of people are actually opposed to it, you know, don't think it's helpful or it's divisive. I actually think it's pretty useful.
I think it is for us. I just wanted to ask Corey a little bit more about that, actually, the whole vegan versus plant-based or plant whatever. I get kind of two conflicting messages when I'm reading about this, and I just wonder what your research shows. That some people, you get like the vegan derogation, especially like do-gooder derogation, and people like being very alienated against vegans, and there's a lot of disgust, even anecdotally. I've got at least 2 stories about people being disgusted by learning someone was vegan this week, and there's a real disgust around it, and very much like, oh, vegans, it's almost like we're the new hate figures now, the new kind of people to really, you know, to deride and things like that. So there seems to be that element of it. And yet there seems to be another side where actually veganism is seen as, it's almost taken on this like sheen of, it's very healthy. It's very, oh, you must be very healthy. You must be living clean. And I think people sometimes will sort of be drawn to these vegan friendly products, especially the ones, sorry, that's Spine's alarm. The vegan friendly products that are labeled vegan, because they see it as some kind of, it's almost superior in some way. So it almost seems like some of the products are seen as superior, even though vegans themselves are seen as figures to be derided. And I'm just wondering if you've got any research that backs any of that up, or any sort of insights.
It's a new paper called Damned If You Do, Damned If You Don't. It's like that for me. Yeah. I don't really have any research specifically on that. I think that there's a lot of psychological research that's now coming out from the vegan psychology folks that might speak to that. I don't know if, Roger, you know any.
No, I don't think so. Not immediately anyway. But then again, I've got to confess that I'm because I've lost my kind of academic status. I don't really have access to the journals like I used to, because, you know, when you were seeing them coming in all the time, that was really kind of useful to keep on top of everything. but I've kind of lost that now. So
I will say that there's new legislation in the UK. So any research that's conducted in the UK has to now be free to access for anyone. So thankfully, a lot of vegan researchers are UK based. A lot of the vegan psychologists are also UK based, and they have this is for people in the chat watching who might be interested in looking more into the actual research on this. There is a psychologist for human intergroup. I can't remember the acronym, but it's called PHAIR, PHAIR. And they have a website where they have a journal, and all that is open access. There's quite a lot of stuff on the vegansociology.com page that's open access. But if it's UK based, anyone should be able to access it. And we're increasingly starting to actually try to answer these questions that I think is very important. It's one of my annoyances about being a scholar and also an activist. And Roger's, I think, one of the few people who gets this. It's like we're just so focused on tradition or what we think is right or what's cool or what other people told us. We don't actually stop to think, well, what actually is the research on this and what is the evidence? Because that's what we need. Other social movements have had a whole cadre of people doing this important research. And I think the animal rights movement has been quite delayed in that way. Historically, it's been mostly philosophers. So it's very important that we're doing this work, that we have psychologists, sociologists, geographers, anthropologists, et cetera, who are starting to actually answer the questions so that we know what to do, in what situations plant-based works or doesn't work, or what's the ramifications when we see a lot of veganism in the media, or what's going to motivate people, in the case of psychologists, what's going to motivate people to make this choice and not that choice. So very much so interested to see how that's panning out over the next decade. I think we're going to see major shifts in that.
Yeah. It's something actually I mean to keep to re-engage with, really, the kind of research things. I've always had research ideas that I've never pursued, seeing myself as an activist instead or something, but something for it. We're a little bit out of time.
We are, aren't we?
Corey, I look forward to your future paper on the reducitarian cartels of the movement.
Can't wait for that one. But Corey, you have got, what's your news, just before we go though, have you got any updates on your upcoming books?
I do. Thank you. I'll quickly push those. So I have a book on ecofeminist religions, or really nature-based religions, i.e. vegan witchcraft, basically looking at witchcraft as a feminist alternative religious kind of conglomeration, and looking at how they claim to care about other animals, but actually they fail in practice quite a bit. And I'm an atheist myself, but I'm very interested in, those non-traditional sort of spiritual practices is very foundational to the ecofeminist movement. So it's really, really fun to actually sit down with a whole bunch of books on witchcraft, go through it and see what do they say and what do they do. And I've finished a manuscript on that, and it's just come back from the reviewers, and it's hopefully I'll have a polished draft off for the editor by the middle of next year. But since that's kind of wrapping up now, most excitingly, I'm also working on a book called Vegan Feminism, where I'm kind of recapping all the hard work I've been doing on vegan feminist activism and research, and et cetera, since since 2012, 13. And looking at the history, I'm interviewing lots of the big names, like Carol Adams is going to be a part of the project, for instance, but not just her, lots of other people who are more 21st century, other people from the 20th century. How I'm going to condense that into the word limit that the editor has given me, I have no idea. But what folks can look forward to is that the interviews will begin in January and February. And as part of the project, as a feminist researcher, I want to make sure that all the research is publicly available and accessible based on, as we were just talking about, for folks who are not in the academy, this is important information. So you can, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is my name, Corey Lee Wrenn, you can get those as soon as I publish those. I'll also be publishing those interviews on veganfeministnetwork.com. The book probably won't come out for another 2 years because of the revisions and all that kind of stuff, but the research will be coming out much sooner. So that's what I'm working on right now. And in the future, I'm going to be working on a book on vegan sociology to encapsulate a lot of the conversations we had today. So thank you very much for letting me plug those.
Excellent. Oh, I can't wait to read some of those, especially definitely the vegan feminist book. I can't wait for that. And of course the witchcraft one. But yeah, anything you want. I've read I haven't read your Irish book, but the other ones I've read, and I love the way you write. I've told you this before. It's very accessible, complex ideas made much more accessible and available. So I love that. I love your style.
You know why? I think it's because I do this stuff that you guys do, and like I've started out doing this, and you have to talk in a way that people get, like human to human, you know.
I think that's a really important thing. That's what I love. That's why I love having you on as well, and like going to your conferences, but also trying to then put those ideas and the theory into like, okay, this all makes sense, but what do we do with it? Like, how do we use it? What do we, how do we then put that into practice in some way? And that's what I'm always really interested in doing, and that's why I like to ask 11 strand questions. Like, what do we do? What do we do with this? But thank you so much for all your work and sharing it with us.
Thanks for letting me.
And Doc, someone's just saying, can you plug your timing for the show on for your Christmas Day special?
Yes, was that Jeremy or Terry? But yeah, thanks for allowing me to do that. So yeah, I got a 10-hour show starting on the 25th, and actually I did a brief interview with Carol yesterday because she's done a couple of little clips for it, which is really nice. She had this really fascinating theory about right-wing women having the same analysis as left-wing women about things like patriarchy. It's just that their solution is different. So the left wing say, destroy the patriarchy. The right wing say, I must find a patriarch to protect me. So it was really fascinating. Anyway, so it starts at my 10 a.m., so British Irish 10 a.m., and it goes for 10 hours. So I finish at 8 in the evening. I've done these in the past. I think this is like the 4th year, and they have run over in the past. So the chances are.
No,
but
I can't imagine that happening.
Yeah, what I try to do is I've got lots of funny clips. I've got lots of short clips. I've got lots of history clips. Obviously, I've got language clips. There's quite a lot of Jeremy in there. There's lots of supportive messages from all around the world. In particular, talking about the people that I do the show for. And there's two groups of people I always have in mind. The isolated vegans, who might be vegans of any age. It's just that I was talking to Tim Barfoot today, and I was saying it's interesting for us in Britain. It's hard to think that there might be vegans who have never met another vegan in person, but it's certainly the case around the world. So I've got those in mind, and I've also got new vegans in mind, especially those who might be coming up to their first vegan Christmas. They might have gone through the negotiations with their nuclear families, but now they're going to get the extended family descending on them. What is that going to do? Are they going to get bullied? Are they going to just be made to feel awkward and all that kind of stuff? So the idea of the entire 10 hours is to give people a vegan space that they can retreat to if they can. Somebody told me in Dublin at the weekend, they're just going to put it on their TV and just have it playing all day and drop in and out of it and all that. And so it's just somewhere where it will give you a little bit of relief from all the cultural speciesism that you're going to be drowned in. And so that's the entire idea. I'm toying with the idea of opening it up so people could come on for an hour to ask questions, but of course they will be able to do that in the chat as well. So I'm hoping that the usual audience will engage with people asking questions during the day as well. So everybody in that sense has got a role. There's going to be a Thrive Vegan World section.
Yes.
Had you forgotten by the look?
No, it's just been such a long time. I've had a little hiatus, haven't I? But yeah, a little Thrive Vegan World special.
And then we've got an animal rights show with live music. We're still doing the technicalities of all that. Alan Jackson's going to be on a couple of times. Alan is a prime mover in the National Animal Rights March and just taking part in the liberation of turkeys. On open rescue, and so we're going to talk about that. Censorship Rights Island. Don't know if Dennis is still here. They're going to feature. Yeah. Okay.
Dylan might. That's Dylan. Brian doesn't bark yet.
Oh yes.
We haven't. That was actually Dylan.
And then in terms of the materials, what I try to do is not just repeat stuff that people will know, and not just repeat new stuff. So there's going to be lots of material that has not really been seen for years. And so hopefully everybody will be able to engage with something which is going to be an interest for them. So that's the plan. Right. That's it. That's me done.
Dylan's excited about tennis. Yeah, I think you're right there. Jeremy, spot on. Yeah, no, Grace, and it's such a brilliant thing that you're doing, Roger. And I know it's it's quite a lot of work for you, but yeah, so it's coming from such a great place. And thank you for putting that space together for all of us. And I hope lots of people here will be tuning in as well. Corey, will you be tuning in over your grub, your Christmas grub?
Well, I might have to, who knows, I might have to tune in. I'm going to my partner's mother's house for Christmas for the first time. I know. But I think one of the reasons I had to finally admit the reason I'd not come before is because of the vegan things. I've gotten to the age where I just will not be around it anymore. I know that's kind of Pollyanna, but I'm just not going to. It makes me really upset, and I'm not going to do it. So she's we'll make it vegan. It's like, okay. So she's been calling quite a lot anxious about like, what do you eat? What do you eat? And because she's eating it, we did get the transition foods. We got the like junk from Sainsbury's vegan Christmas catalog or whatever. So I'm going to have a lot of sodium, a lot of fats, and a lot of taste and delights, and we'll see how it goes.
A lot of sodium and a lot of fats. I like how you're breaking it down into like nutrients.
It'll be good. But I'm a bit worried because with my mom cannot eat any of that. My mom's such a picky eater. She wouldn't eat any of that. She'd rather have a pot of beans than this weird fake meat stuff. So I don't know if his mom's going to like it or not. And if it's really awkward and awful, I'll just pop into the bedroom and tune in to, Red Show Christmas special.
Yay!
well, that's exactly why I do the show to give that opportunity. Yeah. So
yeah, it's amazing. I would have loved to have had that when I was younger. Now that I'm in my 40s, I'm more confident about it, whatever. But even so, like I don't know what I'm walking into, and it may be the case that I do need to retreat. But I can imagine being much younger and so many awful situations. It's a wonderful thing to do that.
I think it's just reassuring just to have people yes. joining you, even in the chat there, just thinking, do you know what? All of these people probably feel the same way that I do, and we all see things in a very similar way. Just to have that reassurance, because sometimes you can feel so isolated and alienated from your own friends and family and just your society in general that it can make you despair at times, and you think, oh, I'm just so alone. Just to know there's other people thinking like you is, for me, was just so brilliant. Like probably saved me in some way.
I tell you what's really interesting. By doing these little short 2-minute clips with people, kind of wishing people well and, isolated vegans, new vegans, all that kind of stuff. It's interesting the number of different strategies that people have come up with as vegans about how to negotiate this time of year. Like some people are almost like saying, well, argue at the dinner table because it'll hone your activism skills. Other people are kind of don't go near there. There's one vegan couple who actually go down to their local beach and have their Christmas there. So there's lots of different ways that vegans negotiate this issue, and of course it changes over time. And as you just alluded to there, Corey, it's when you're a new vegan when it's the worst.
Yeah, but also my partner's mother, who I've only met once before, so it's just like it's automatically brings you right back to. Does you want to make her? You don't want to make things
walk in there like a 15-year-old, kind of.
Yeah, but we'll have the wine. It'll be fine.
Do you know what? I know we haven't got time, but I'd push back on being a new vegan being the worst, actually, because I think for me. It got a lot worse. The more vegan I became, if that makes sense, the more I got really absorbed into animal rights, the harder it got.
I couldn't sit with people. I couldn't do it now.
Yeah, totally. It's got a lot harder.
I was just trying to be like loose, like whatever. It doesn't bother me. But the longer I got into it, because how long have you been vegan? How long have you been vegan, Wendy?
I think it's 27 years. I'm going
27 years of exposure to horrible information, graphic images, triggering stuff. And that's why I think it gets worse and worse, because that's what finally reached
saturation.
Like, Anyway.
Yeah, and I think I shut it out a lot more easily in the beginning, and I just managed to like put it out of my mind. Now, because I'm so like, it's literally, I embody it in my, you know, everyday life, in everything I do and everything I think.
Exactly.
It's so much harder. It's so much harder. So yeah, the new vegan thing is harder. But I just wanted to offer that little bit of a alternative perspective.
Yeah, I think
pressure may be harder.
I think it's really interesting, and I get the point. I just think that when you're new and you're just learning stuff, and people start all the usual stuff, protein, and you know all the rest of the crap that we have to deal with all the time. If you're new at it, you must feel under a lot of pressure, and especially in a kind of hostile family situation. That's how I think of it.
I think we do have research that supports that, Roger, that one of the main reasons people go vegan or stop being vegan is because of the social aspect, because they feel pressured or whatever. So I think, for me and for Wendy, like you and I, like the difficulty is a different type of difficulty. The difficulty is a psychological, like the trauma associated with, whereas for new vegans, it's about finding the confidence. Like the longer you're vegan, the more normal it is even for you, and then you're used to all the bullshit you get from other people.
You just don't tolerate it as much.
we have to take that seriously, because that's a major reason why people stop being vegan, is because they're getting the family friend pressure.
Yeah, and I think it's a full circle to what we started with, is the fact that people have to understand in the movement the power of socialization processes, the power of being a social animal, the power of peer group pressure. And, you know, I've known a lot of vegans, it was easy for me to go vegan, so they expect the rest of the world to be the same. It's not. Some people are much more embedded in their family. I never was, but some people are. And, you know, some people, you know, have even said in talks and stuff that if push comes to shove, my family will come before my veganism. A lot of vegans will reverse that, right? And so, and that would come with strength of character and also experience, the fact you've been doing it for a while and you go, right, feck this, not having this anymore.
Yeah, I know. It's a little bit simplistic to say, oh, it's so easy to be vegan, because actually there's so many elements to being vegan that some of it might be easy and some of it isn't. And that might change depending on who we are and what situation we're in, what context we're in, what our upbringing is, etc. So, yeah. But and it's still...
May I end with a positive note on this?
Oh God, yes, please.
Talking about all the trauma and the buildup, and it's like you, Wendy. It's like day in and day out. I live animal rights and veganism. There's no off switch. I do this on Saturdays. I do it all day, every day, like regularly having nightmares about it. Like when I have nightmares, almost always it's about like things happening to animals. It's like embodies me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it got to the point where, because actually it is part of my job that I have to do that. I teach it, and I'm writing about it. That it had to come to a point where it was like, there has to be a safe space. Like there is some kind of boundary here where I don't have to be forcibly thinking about this all the time. And so a couple of years ago, actually, it was after I watched a documentary on the dairy industry in India. And I was trying to force myself to watch it, even though I don't watch that kind of stuff, because I wanted to, because that's a thing I get quite a lot in my classes from students, is like, oh, they worship cows in India. And I was like, well, that's definitely not true. Superficially, yes, it's true, but it's so much more complicated than that. So I wanted to watch the documentary so I can get up-to-date information on that and be prepared for that when it came up in my class. And the images I saw in just the first 20 minutes of that movie psychologically broke me, and I was like really, really messed up for a long time. And it was just really, really, really bad. And I said, this has got to stop. I have to start doing stuff to take care of myself, because the longer I'm in this, the harder it is to do it, because it's building up. And so one of the things that I did was I said to my friends, I can't be around this anymore. I will not be at the table. And then, by the way, I used to be someone who would say, well, that just makes you look like an angry, obnoxious vegan, and you're alienating yourself and you're taking your message away from the table when you're not sitting with people. And it's like, but I've also been vegan for over 20 years. And at this point, like, I have to now prioritize myself so I can sustain myself. And so I just said to my friends, I will no longer be at the table when we're eating animals, whatever. I'm out. And then also said in my own house, believe it or not, like I was trying to be like the cool vegan or whatever. And when people come to visit, I wouldn't tell them not to bring animals in. I'd make a stink, but let them do it. And I said, that's it. And I had one of my friends who's vegan make me a sign, and he could make a lot of money if he put this on Etsy. But he made a sign that says, "This is welcome to my vegan home. No animal products, please," right on the front of the door. And I asked my friends, do not bring non-vegan stuff in my house anymore. I will not be present with you when you're eating non-vegan food. I'm not going to be there. And I thought that, well, that would be it. And there's been a few times where, yeah, it's been a bit awkward and I had to get up and leave or whatever. But for the most part, my friends, and it's a big circle of friends, it's not like 2 or 3 people, a big circle of friends, stopped bringing non-vegan stuff to the house, intentionally would buy vegan stuff to bring to parties and things like that. And then when we would go out to eat, all of them, without even me having to say anything, would order only vegan things. And this has been over 2 years now. And I was just absolutely shocked by that, because I thought that, well, I'm immediately going to set a boundary that is going to mean I'm going to have to alienate myself and isolate. But it was actually the opposite. So what I'm saying to folks is I don't think everybody is in a position to do this, but it was like through my friend circle, right? It may actually be the case if your friends and family do love you enough, they may respect you enough to start. And again, unfortunately, this isn't about animals. It's about respecting me and my whatever. But that's just one thing I wanted to share positively, because I've been a vegan for over 20 years, and I never thought that was something that would be negotiable. But in fact, it was negotiable. If you stand up for yourself and ask for respect, you'd be surprised. Mm-hmm. People will give you the respect if they love you.
Yeah, it's that's brilliant. And that kind of reminds me of that saying, we teach people how to treat us. And I suppose it is that, isn't it? It's like if we really embody our values, then we'll attract that in.
That's a really good line. I mean, that point was so brilliant, Corey. I've got to come back on it, because it's a very important media movement issue, this. Casey Taft always said, we get told, by the cartels that, reduce our ask. The small ask is best. Leonard crap. All day long. Whereas there's lots of psychological research that says the big ask is best. And in some sense, you became, okay, feck this. I'm going to do the big ask. Put the sign, and it wasn't as disastrous as reducer terms will tell us. Right.
It took me being pushed up to the edge, basically. Like I was so really hurt by that. I mean, really bad. It really took me being pushed up to the edge before I said, I really have no choice now. And there you go. And then, and may I also say, calling him out now, my partner, he's not vegan. He's not vegan at all. But when he started dating me, I said, it's not going to be in my house. It's not going to be around me. And when we made the decision, like, for him to move in, I said, well, this is important. And he's like, yeah. And so, and we're talking about like a regular man meat eating, whatever. And he's just like, okay, and I won't do that. And this is somebody who's never learned to cook or anything, but now he's learning to cook, and he respects me. And I know that he eats animals when he's at work or whatever, but I don't know about it. And hopefully one day he will make his own choice to do that. You can't force somebody to do that, right? But that for me was the first time, because I was just so sick of being in really bad relationships with men that didn't respect me. And number one is you can't enact violence in front of me by eating animals. Like, this is non-negotiable anymore. And then again, I was surprised. Like, he said, okay. So
I've got so many questions. Now, but that would be a whole other show now. We'd have to go into a whole other hour of show. That's just popped up so many questions. But I just love, you've just put a comment out there. But yeah, totally, Deb. And I just loved this comment. It just made me laugh. Sorry. just to I think that's brilliant. Imagine if we could just have something that would, you could walk through a scanner through your door, at the airport, but it was like for anything that wasn't vegan friendly, like you're in or you're out.
We need a vegan mental detector.
Hey.
That vegan pledge thing, right? I always wonder with that. It's like because we focus on the consumption of the food, but what about what they're wearing as well? Because I often think, well, that just kind of, we're totally focusing on the dietary aspect then, and making it, we're almost going, the dietary aspect is the main thing, because actually you can walk into my house with leather shoes on, so-called leather shoes, wearing another animal's skin, or
not in my house,
or whatever. Not in your house. Oh, that's great. I love it. But but it's funny that, isn't it? I'll sit with you and with your animal skin handbag, but I won't if you're going to put it in your mouth. And it's like, where do you draw those lines? And I just wonder, that's again a whole other show on that.
We could, because like Joe Kidd has an opinion on that. The woman who runs a veganic farm, she used to do a vegan market here in Canterbury. Unfortunately, after COVID killed it, and the rise of all the fake meats, people just go to Sainsbury's and stuff. But she had on the website for people who want to go to the vegan market, it said no leather shoes allowed. Like, please don't bring it. Like, she was down to even that. And they're not going to do that, right? But the fact is, if they go and they look it up and they see that on the website, I think the point is to make them think about it.
Make it bring awareness to it. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Well, guys,
carry on chatting now.
Glass, so maybe we should call it.
Right. Okay.
If only we had 10 hours. Oh, guess what?
Yeah. Well, nobody would be daft enough to put a show on that long, though, would they? So
no, I can't imagine that would ever happen.
No. Well, we've had a big crowd, and they've kept with us, which I'm always amazed at, that they will listen to us rambling on. So thank you very much for that. We shall see you again. In fact, we'll see you in 2 days' time.
Yes.
Yeah, just if you're into the I'm Right show, because there's going to be one. That's what I could.
That's at 12 o'clock.
12 GMT. Yeah, for that, with a little bit of live music. So it's something different for us. So thanks everybody.
And thanks especially to Corey. Thanks for coming on, Corey.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
A really good conversation. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. See you soon.